What's going on, guys? It's Danny from Fantasy Stock Exchange here, and today I'll be riding solo talking about the murkiest backfield situations in the NFC, breaking them down in terms of potential fantasy football relevance. For this video, we'll really be focusing on these backfields, discussing potential roles and what the effect of coaching could be on what we should expect from these committees. Today's focus, as you'll soon see, is giving you guys that competitive edge on who we should be targeting from backfields based on ADP in fantasy football for 2021. Make sure to sign up for Underdog Fantasy using code FSC to get free access to both of our draft guides, Dynasty, which is live right now, and Season Long, which will be live on July 15th. And when you do so using our code on Underdog Fantasy, you will be getting a $25 matchback bonus on your deposit if you deposit $10 or more on their site. You guys can see that going across the screen. But again, if you guys enjoy content like this and are interested in more, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below and turn notifications on to never miss a beat on an FSC upload. We're on the road to 5K. Let's smash it, y'all. Good? You subscribe? All right, hit that intro. Okay, so let's start off with the first team of the video, and that's going to be the San Francisco 49ers, a much maligned, much well-known murky backfield, really of the last few years. But their current depth chart, they have Elijah Mitchell, Trey Sermon, Wayne Gallman, Raheem Mostert. You guys can kind of see that. And their current ADPs are as follows. So Trey Sermon leads this pack, currently going off the board about the 72nd overall pick. Right, Raheem Mostert currently going off the board around the 81st pick. Wayne Gallman, Elijah Mitchell, and obviously, again, Jeffrey Wilson, but he won't really be included here because he did, in fact, tear his meniscus. He's going to be out for the year. So let me break down the situation first. Again, this is a team from last year, had really a lot of turnover in this running back room. They recently spent 2 draft picks to add to this backfield, with Trey Sermon being selected in the 3rd round and Elijah Mitchell being their 6th round pick. And from last season, again, you had those 2 draft picks and Wayne Gallman to really replace that production from the departed Tevin Coleman and Jerick McKinnon. And in terms of overall vacated volume, we're talking about 109 rushing attempts and 51 backfield targets vacated from last year. But when you also add into the fact that Jeff Wilson should be missing the entire year, those numbers spiked to 235 carries and 79 targets from last year. In addition to the overall offensive vacated production, because of the departure of Jerick McKinnon and them missing Jeff Wilson for the season, we're looking at 47 vacated red zone rushes and 13 rushing touchdowns vacated from last year inside the 20-yard line. So there is a huge role, a huge piece of the pie really available for a lot of these guys to really capture. So you combine this with the fact that this team possesses one of the best offensive lines in the entire league, combined with also one of the most exquisite, most intricate running schemes run by Kyle Shanahan. There's a lot to be excited about here with the San Francisco 49ers. You guys can see that offensive line on the screen. You mentioned Trent Williams, Laken Tomlinson, Alex Mack, rookie Aaron Banks added to the right guard position, and Mike McGlinchey on the right side. A very talented, very stout offensive line. Now let's talk about the coaching tendencies. So you guys can see on the screen, but the San Francisco 49ers have really been a run-dominant team, as we've seen in recent years. In 2020, despite missing their starting quarterback for the majority of the year, this was still a team that ranked 9th highest in the NFL, with a 45% run rate in neutral game scripts in 2020, compared to their 2018-2019 totals. 2019, they were the 3rd highest at 47%, and 2018, they were the 10th highest at 44%. So we know when these games are between 7 points either way, San Francisco really wants to run the football, establish a run, create that identity that they've really shown over these last few years. And when you combine this with the fact that 296 rushing attempts, or 78.3% of their total rushing, came from off tackle or outside zone rushing, you can really see that wide zone scheme take effect for Kyle Shanahan's team. And again, when we're talking about personnel right here, this is the 3rd highest 21 personnel rate, 4th lowest 11 personnel, and 6th lowest 12 personnel usage in the entire NFL. So overall, this is a team that will commit, will want to run the ball, and we've seen it overall in terms of their tendencies, in terms of those splits over these last few years. But now let's break down the potential roles, because that's the main reason why you're at this video. Yes, we can talk about scheme all we want, but we got to put the players in the scheme. We got to put the players in the situations to really project forward to what they could be doing from a fantasy football outlook perspective. So let's start off with Trey Sermon. Again, you guys can see on the screen, but Draft Sharks actually shared this. And according to ESPN's Nick Wagner, he's been getting and soaking up those first team reps with Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert, both missing time during the offseason camp. And according to him, he's actually made a strong first impression and looked particularly good as a pass catcher out of the backfield. And talking about relevance, this wasn't necessarily a big, strong part of Sermon's game in college, only 48 total receptions in 4 years. But considering the fact that he was used in pass protection on 31.4% of his snaps and was one of the highest rated pass blockers in the entire 2021 class, if he's really showing out as a true pass catcher in training camp, that is definitely something to monitor going into your drafts later in the offseason. I mean, if he gets that third down role, we're talking about a guy who is very good in pass protection. If he shows that he's an adept receiver out of the backfield, that could be his role for the taking. So in addition to making this strong first impression, we see that Sermon posted some very impressive rushing metrics in this class, ranking particularly high in yards after contact per attempt, 4.04, tackles avoided per attempt, 28.1% rate, and an elusiveness rating of 116.9. The way I kind of view Sermon, as we'll get into, is I think he's the main back in goal line situations. And again, if he's showing that he's a great pass blocker and he's looking good out of the backfield as a receiver, I think he could chip into some third down work immediately, given his prowess. I mean, at the end of the day here, we're looking for guys that can be on the field. And if Sermon is already showing that he can be on the field, I view him as having the highest upside of this entire murky backfield situation. So as we'll get into, if I had to choose a back to own from this backfield today, my answer is going to be Trey Sermon. So now let's get into Raheem Mostert's projected role. And I think this could be potentially the main feature back we see between the 20s. He's shown in the past that when he is on the field, he is a very efficient running back. The problem is, as the old cliche would always say, the best ability is availability. And Raheem Mostert has just shown that he cannot stay on the field at a consistent rate over these last few years. If you're actually talking about his overall grade as a rusher, in 2020, he was the 30th graded rusher by PFF. And in 2019, he was actually PFF's 16th graded rusher. So makes sense. A little bit of a drop off there, dealt with injuries. I'm not too focused on that 14 rank discrepancy between years. The thing that we should really focus on is the fact that this guy averaged 15.7 half PPR points per game from weeks 1 to 6, which, if you actually compared it to a full season, actually ranked the same as JT's output on the season. So this is a guy who showed he was a high upside RB2, RB1 type in those first 6 games. But once he came back from injury, the situation just really wasn't there for him. And in general, I like him. He's got the explosive speed. He's got the home run ability. But in my opinion, we're still looking at a situation where you're committing a top 81 overall pick currently to a 29-year-old back coming off of multiple seasons ruined by injury. His current 709 ADP, it's just too high for me personally. Again, if Sermon, in my opinion, is going to provide those more valuable touches in the red zone and potentially in the passing game, Raheem Mostert is just going to be that fodder back between the tackles, between the 20s. And in general, that's going to be the least valuable role on this team. So if I had to pick one, this is the one I'm kind of fading. I just don't necessarily want to take any part in Raheem Mostert going in the first 7 rounds currently. So, and let's talk quickly about Elijah Mitchell. Again, in my opinion, he could be the third down back and the primary backup to Mostert. Again, this is a guy I was a lot higher on in pre-draft. He was actually my RB7 pre-draft, and this might sound a little skeptical, but I actually had him ranked higher than Sermon as well. And in my opinion, I mean, you're going to see the athleticism in a second when we're talking about like value at ADP. But Elijah Mitchell, we're talking about the athleticism, we're talking about the talent to fit that Mostert role from a wide zone scheme, get on the edge type of perspective. But he's more advanced as a receiver, in my opinion, even comparatively to a Raheem Mostert type. So, and let's talk about the last two. Michael Hasty, to me, he's just a jag, maybe a good depth piece that you can have. Undrafted free agent from last year, showed out in a couple of games, but nothing necessarily that will scare me off of this backfield. And Wayne Gallman, I honestly view him as either a cut candidate or a potential like low-end depth piece. I mean, the way I view it is they added Wayne Gallman prior to the draft as really insurance in case they didn't wind up with the back, but they ended up with two. So I would be shocked if Wayne Gallman was on this final roster going into the 2021 season. Now let's talk about one to own. I alluded to it. I will take Sermon due to the potential value of his role on the goal line. We've seen this offense really function in the past, and Jeff Wilson had a really good amount of RB2, RB3 type value, despite not even being remotely the type of complete back that I think Sermon can develop into in San Francisco. So if I had to pick today, Sermon would be my pick, and it's reflected based off his current ADP going atop this group. And in terms of who's the best ADP value, you guys can see it on the screen, but Elijah Mitchell is one that really intrigues me. Give me a healthy Elijah Mitchell at his current value. His skill set, potential as a pass catcher, and scheme fit as a wide zone rusher on this team all bode well for his potential fit. I mean, when we're talking about the efficiency metrics, I mentioned it a little bit with Trey Sermon, but with Elijah Mitchell, we're talking about a 120.8 elusiveness rating, a 29.94 tackles avoided per attempt percentage, and a 4.04 yards after contact per attempt. In my opinion, he has the most natural hands of this group, what I saw watching him on film. He's an elite athlete, has the speed to fit this wide zone Shanahan scheme. And in general, I mean, we mentioned it. If Raheem Mostert were to ever miss time, I think Elijah Mitchell can take that role and run with it. The biggest question mark here obviously is going to be draft capital. But the 49ers have shown in the past that they will ride their hot hand at the running back position. They don't care about the financial commitment. They don't care about the draft capital commitment. We saw it in recent years. They gave Jerick McKinnon a huge contract and then proceeded to not really use him in a great capacity over these last couple of years coming back from injury. So overall, Sermon, I would prefer to own the most. But at current ADP, give me Elijah Mitchell all day and every day. He's currently going off the board outside of the top 200 picks. I just think that's too low for a guy that I really liked on film and I think lands an opportunity to develop into that role. So anyways, we can get on to the next team, and that's going to be Bush's favorite team. So let's talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So their current depth chart is as follows. Again, the main two backs we have here are going to be Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette, with Giovanni Bernard and Keyshawn Vaughn in particular pretty much being the ones that are working in. So ADP on the screen. Leonard Fournette currently leading this group at a near 97 ADP. Ronald Jones second, Giovanni Bernard third, and Keyshawn Vaughn trailing behind all those three. The situation. Returning main backs from last year are here. Again, we're talking about Leonard Fournette and Ronald Jones in particular. And now they add Giovanni Bernard to this unit. When you're breaking down this team last year, Ronald Jones had 39 of the 80 total rushing attempts from the red zone situations, but he only really converted 6 into touchdowns. So, however, Leonard Fournette was next on the totem pole, and although he performed slightly better, this is still relatively average comparatively to the rest of the league. I mean, this necessarily wasn't really a team that was really that great when it came to red zone situations. I mean, we're mentioning a 59% success rate for Ronald Jones and a 63% success rate for Leonard Fournette. That's about league average. However, when you're comparing it to situations, this is going to be a team that's going to be in the red zone a lot. And we still really get a lot of hope when we're looking at this offensive line. Just an absolutely stacked unit. One of the top offensive lines in the entire NFL. And really, in general, the main inconsistency from the Tampa Bay running game will almost assuredly, if it were to falter, come from ambiguity in the backfield, combined with the fact that there could be inconsistencies amongst the backs, rather than really poor offensive line play. You guys can see it on the screen, but Ali Marpet, one of the top 7 guards in the league. Tristan Wirfs, as a rookie, absolutely dominated. And you're still talking about really complimentary options. Ryan Jensen was a top 20 center. Alex Kappa, top 22 guard, as you see. And Donovan Smith, yes, he gets criticized by a lot of the Tampa Bay community, but he's a fine, average offensive line or starting offensive tackle. So that offensive line is going to be able to perform. It just really depends on the back behind them finding the holes and being able to be efficient with their touches. But anyways, let's talk about the coaching real quick. It's a team that really doesn't run the ball in neutral game strips. Again, a 38% run rate in neutral game strips in 2020, which is actually the 5th lowest run rate in the NFL. And when you're actually bringing that to the goal line, They had a 40% run rate in the red zone, which was 6th lowest in the entire red zone in the NFL. So this is a team that they're going to hum and hoe by their passing game. But if we can pick up on these options, we're talking about Ronald Jones, talking about Leonard Fournette, maybe Giovanni Bernard, we're going to get into specifically. I don't necessarily hold out a lot of hope for Keyshawn Vaughn. There's going to be opportunities to score the ball. I mean, we're talking about a team, as I mentioned, 80 overall red zone touches. If your running back's getting, or a committee is getting 80 red zone touches, and your running back, let's just say Ronald Jones last year had 39 of them, that's so much opportunity to be able to score the ball. And let's be honest, when we're talking about RB2, RB3 fringe types, which is really what we're hoping for from this backfield, you look for the touchdown opportunity, as we'll get into. So overall, let's look at the potential roles. I view Ronald Jones as the main back on 1st and 2nd down. He really should get the first crack on the goal line and is by far the most efficient Tampa Bay back as a pure rusher, as a pure runner. Yes, Leonard Fournette saw the majority of the touches in the playoffs, but let's look at the fact that Ronald Jones is coming back from injury. And when he was healthy during the season, Ronald Jones was that main guy. And if you look at every single really efficiency metric as a rusher, Ronald Jones was a more efficient back than Leonard Fournette. So there's still people in the industry holding the hope that Leonard Fournette's going to be this workhorse type back. And while I think he's going to be a fine fantasy football option, let's not discount Ronald Jones. He's still a very good, very efficient between the tackles runner, and a lot better in that regard comparatively to Leonard Fournette. Speaking of Leonard Fournette, though, in my opinion, he's going to be the 1B to Rojo and should figure into the passing game, into the 3rd down game, given the fact that we really saw Ronald Jones has struggled in that capacity throughout his career. And in general, I think he could operate as that main 3rd down back, seeing his role from last year with the team. However, though, the guy I really want to talk about here is going to be Giovanni Bernard. Again, he was brought in on a 1-year, $1.2 million year, $1.2 million deal this offseason. I mean, it's pennies, but he really offers the ability to affect that passing game. Again, this is a guy throughout his career has gotten 40-plus targets in every single season, and he's coming off a season this past year of 59. And in general, we're talking about a guy who's an adequate pass blocker, 36th highest grade league-wide, and really could figure into 3rd down work if Rojo or Fournette struggle with their protections. And in my opinion, it could be a sneaky late-round PPR dart throw. And I mentioned it with Keyshawn Vaughn. He's just a guy, wasted 3rd-round pick, didn't touch the field at all as a rookie. I don't view him much more than fodder in this backfield. As you guys know, I like saying that. But anyways, talking about one to own, give me Ronald Jones. This is the guy in the backfield that has his role most unchanged during the offseason. And in my opinion, it's still going to be that team's main 1st and 2nd down back and should really lead this team in attempts on the goal line. Again, we're going to get into it with Fournette in terms of like who I like best at value. But Fournette has a bit more appeal in PPR formats. The acquisition of Gio could really impact that 3rd down snap percentage that he operated in 2020 with a threat capable as a receiver and blocker, as I mentioned, with the efficiencies that Giovanni Bernard posted last year. Now let's get into it. Who was the best ADP value? Talking strictly season-long formats, because again, I don't really like these flyer options in best ball because you're looking for straight upside. But in season-long redraft formats, you need a guy that can come and give you a flex type of value. Give me the current cost acquisition for Giovanni Bernard. He's shown he could be a capable back in the past with this role and could really hamper Leonard Fournette's snaps on 3rd down. And he's currently going off the board in the 16th round. He's basically free in your drafts. And in my opinion, if you're getting someone who's basically free that can offer 50 reception, 3rd down back type upside in the biggest situation, I'm taking the risk there. So in season long, I am fine with taking that flyer on Giovanni Bernard. And in best ball, I'm kind of avoiding anybody apart from the top 2 backs in best ball because I still think that the top 2 relative to the week could perform an absolute boom week. But in redraft, give me Ronald Jones as the top guy. Give me Giovanni Bernard as a sleeper. So anyways, let's go on to the next situation. And for the common observer, this can be a very easy situation to spot given the fact that one of these guys is much more talented than the other. But when we break down the situation, it's actually going to be a decent amount closer than people really want to give credit because the guy they brought in is still a talented player in his own right. But it's Detroit Lions. You guys can see the main 2 backs here. Let's be honest here. We can talk about fodder like freaking Jamar Jefferson, Dedrick Mills, Michael Warren, but the main 2 backs are going to be DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams. The ADP currently, as you guys can see, the only 2 drafted backs on Underdog ADP right now. DeAndre Swift's currently going off the board in the top 30 picks. Jamal Williams going off the board around the 133rd overall pick. So let's talk about the situation. You guys can see it on the screen, but with the departures of Kerryon Johnson and Adrian Peterson in particular, the Lions vacate 209 rushing attempts and 48 targets, while also vacating 44 red zone carries from last year, with AP getting the majority of those at 35, despite only posting a 43% success rate on those touches. So, and we see from DeAndre Swift, he was by far the most efficient back in the situation on the team. Despite only having 20 rushing attempts from inside the 20, Swift produced 8 rushing touchdowns, and on the 9 carries he had inside the 5-yard line, he scored on 6 of them. He really showed that he has a nose for the end zone. Kind of reminiscent, in my opinion, to another AFC North back. Kill me in the comment section. But in terms of size, in terms of ability to really just find that end zone, find that pay dirt, he reminds me of Aaron Jones. We're seeing a guy that in 13 games last year, DeAndre Swift had 10 touchdowns, despite really playing sparingly in some of those games. And we were talking about a guy who, in those 13 games that he played, only played on 65% of snaps on 2 occasions. So overall, the volume may be a concern. Again, those limited snaps are going to cost him because he's not necessarily going to be an Ezekiel Elliott, going to be a Christian McCaffrey, Joe Mixon type of workhorse in the common sense. But I think we're talking about a guy similar to Aaron Jones, has that touchdown upside, has that reception upside, as we'll get into. And I still like DeAndre Swift as a high upside RB2 type of back. So if we're looking at the situation here, he was good last year. We're presuming a jump for Swift in 2021, given their departures. But this also bodes well for Jamal Williams. Again, 44 red zone carries. We can't just translate that year to year because this offense is going to be worse, given that their top 2 receivers and their quarterback departed. But it's still going to be available to him. There's still going to be touches available to him in the red zone area. And Jamal Williams has shown that he's able to get it done on that situation regardless. But now let's look at the offensive line. And this is the main situation, in my opinion, that really goes unnoticed when you're talking about the Lions. But they have a very solid offensive line. Again, we're looking at it. Taylor Decker is an above-average starter, graded as the 13th best tackle in the league last year. You add Penei Sewell, in my opinion, a generational offensive tackle prospect, was my top offensive tackle in this draft. Fell all the way to 7 to you. And if you guys watch any of those videos on Twitter, any of those videos on YouTube, they were absolutely through the moon when he actually fell to them. And Frank Ragnow is one of the absolute top centers in the game, 3rd-ranked center in 2020. We just need adequate play from Jackson and Gabe Jackson and Halapudi Vaitai. And if that's the case, this should be an above-average offensive line unit, in my opinion. But now let's talk about the coaching tendencies. And we'll briefly mention what they did in 2020 because it's not going to matter a lot. There's so much turmoil at the head coaching position, as I mentioned with the coaching changes video. But this is a team in 2020 had a 42% run rate in neutral game scripts, which was 16th in the NFL. And in terms of red zone rate was at 47%, which was, again, also 16th in the NFL. So this is just a league average team when it came to running the ball in general, when it came to running the ball in the red zone. But when you're actually looking at the coaching hires, offensive coordinator, they hired Anthony Lynn. Head coach, they hired Dan Campbell. Anthony Lynn coming from the Chargers, Dan Campbell coming from the Saints. The Saints were at 54% run rate in the red zone, which was 10th highest run rate in the red zone in the entire NFL. And the Chargers were at 50%, which is the 14th highest run rate in the red zone in the entire NFL. So while it's slightly an uptick, it's still going to be around that league average type of area, in my opinion. But anyways, let's break down the main roles. That's why you came to the video. Let's talk about why these guys are going where they are. And in my opinion, both of them are, I mean, you're talking about Swift in particular, is probably going around where he should be going. But Jamal Williams, I think, really has a lot of appeal at his current ADP, as we'll get into. But DeAndre Swift, he's the main back. He should get the bulk of the opportunity and hover around that 65-70% snap percentage, as we saw when he took over last year. The main topic of why I'm so excited about DeAndre Swift is the potential usage in the receiving game. So you guys can see on the screen, but PFF's own Nathan Jenke tweeted this out. The leaders in most explosive catches, which is 15-plus yard catches, or 15-plus yards gained on catches in the last 3 seasons at the running back position, tied for first, Austin Eckler and Alvin Kamara. Yes, those are elite receiving backs. I understand that. But the reason why I'm excited is because we're looking at the situation now where the Lions bring both of those offensive coordinators, or offensive coaches, to their team. Talking about Anthony Lynn, who's the head coach of the Chargers. Talking about Dan Campbell, who was a head offensive assistant for the Saints. This is going to be a team that knows how to use their receiving back. And as good of a receiver as Jamal Williams is, DeAndre Swift is going to be that third down back. He's going to be that receiving back. We saw it last year. And in a situation where they're losing their top 2 wide receivers from last year, DeAndre Swift is going to be put out wide. He's going to be used in the slot, is really going to be used in all facets of the game as a receiver, similar in terms of versatility to what we saw from Eckler and Kamara. Now, am I saying he's going to be the next Eckler? He's going to be the next Kamara? Still might be a little premature to say that. But in terms of talent, in terms of potential target output he could see this year, I can see him vaulting into that tier of getting 100-plus targets, really being that receiving back that we covet and we crave in fantasy football. I think Swift has all the opportunity, all the possibility to really get into that role. And in general, we're looking at it from Jamal Williams now. I think he's going to be a primary rotation back and a contributor on a first and second down and goal line situations, as I mentioned. So let's talk about the one to own. I think this is pretty clear by now. We see overall or nearly 100 pick discrepancy between them. But I'll take DeAndre Swift at face value. Again, this is a guy that we saw the talent on display this past year. Following his week 5 bye, he averaged 14.3 half PPR points per game, despite, as I mentioned, only eclipsing 65% of the snaps on 2 occasions. 14.3 half PPR points per game, which would have been an RB2 across the year. 65% of snaps on 2 occasions. And again, while I do think Jamal Williams is going to chip into those overall red zone, overall and vacated red zone touches, I still believe Swift is going to take a leap from those 20 that he saw this past year. And again, I'm not saying that Swift is going to be the next CMC in terms of overcoming a situation, but Swift has all the talent in the world. Again, my RB1 pre-draft last year, and CMC faced a similar offseason chatter back in 2018 when they brought in CJ Anderson when he was supposed to be this main back, and CMC broke out into a league winner that year. Fade the noise, take the talented player. I think Swift is poised to really post fringe top 10 points based on expected receiving volume available alone. So talking about the ADP value, though, as much as I love DeAndre Swift at his current ADP, and I think he's going to be a fine third-round pick in fantasy football, I really love where Jamal Williams is going. Again, we're talking about a guy from strict value. He should be in that standalone 10 to 12 touch per game potential. But we're also combining the fact that he's got really great upside as a handcuff if Swift were to miss any time. So therefore, you're talking about the standalone 10 to 12 touches per game. Talk about the potential if Swift were to go down as being an RB2 type. His current 11th round price tag is just way too low way too low in my opinion. Obviously, I like it. I was going to say for my liking, but I really love it. And again, if you're fading RB and you need an RB3 in the 11th round, I think Jamal Williams could be a fine flex play on most weeks. And if DeAndre Swift is in the lineup, I think he would give you RB3 type appeal. But if Swift were to miss any time, we're talking about a guy who should be a fringe top 15, top 17 overall running back in fantasy football that you're getting in the 11th round currently. So great value there. But finally, let's wrap up the video. The Arizona Cardinals, so you guys can see, but their depth chart currently, the main 2 backs we have to worry about are going to be Chase Edmonds and James Conner. Their current ADPs, as you see, Chase Edmonds going off the board inside the top 70, and James Conner currently going off the board right around the 109th overall pick. So situation, again, this was the number 2 ranked team in pace of play in the NFL this past season, trailing only the Dallas Cowboys. And in general, we're talking about it. Kenyon Drake has departed. He was the leader out of this backfield in 2020, and he vacates 239 vacated carries and 31 vacated targets from last year. 56 of those vacated carries actually came in red zone situations. Again, this is a guy who ranked first on the team in red zone success rate, despite only posting a 50% success rate clip. And now the team brings in James Conner as the main competition in the backfield for Chase Edmonds, and really the only one of fantasy relevance when it comes to breaking down fantasy outlooks. Again, we can talk about Eno Benjamin. He's getting drafted, but realistically, we're talking about a 7th round back that showed nothing as a rookie. So I'm not really touching him in any type of format. The main 2 we're focusing on, Chase Edmonds, James Conner. So let's talk about the coaching tendencies real quick, because this was a team in 2020 that had a 45% run rate in neutral game scripts, which was 11th in the NFL, and a 57% run rate in the red zone, which was 7th highest in the NFL. So let's talk about potential roles. Chase Edmonds, in my opinion, is going to be the main starter and is going to be the 3rd down back. Given his lack of usage and success in the red zone, as we'll get into with James Conner, I believe that the Cardinals view Edmonds as their 3 down between the tackles, or between the 20, starter, which in PPR formats, in my opinion, will still give him the opportunity to post up some RB2, RB3 type of numbers. And at his current RB27 ADP, that's pretty appropriate. So I think he's the most talented back on the roster. And if he does more to really garner and prove that he can handle a goal line role, I mean, we're talking about a back that could have top 15 to top 20 upside. But again, I view that the Cardinals showed their cards last year, a little pun intended, on their preferred role for where they want Edmonds to be on this team, being that, again, between the 20s, 3rd down role type of operation on this team. So despite this, again, I still expect Edmonds to overall lead this backfield in touches, and he'll probably garner around a 60% opportunity share, with the majority of that, again, coming in the passing game. So, but now let's talk about James Conner. James Conner should step in immediately and provided this team with an above-average goal line back ability, which was clearly the weakness of this backfield in 2020, as I pointed out, with both Drake and Edmonds struggling to really find much success in the cramped part of the field in that goal line, in those final 20 yards to find pay dirt. Again, we're talking about a back last year in James Conner who posted 29 rushing attempts and 7 rushing touchdowns with a 66% success rushing rate in the red zone, comparatively to what we saw earlier with Kenyon Drake and Chase Edmonds, both producing at a 50% and 30% respectively success rate in the red zone. So looking at James Conner quick, despite missing 3 games, I mentioned his stats, but James Conner was the highest volume red zone back on the Steelers last year. And again, he eclipsed both of those Edmonds and both of those Kenyon Drake's percentages on the Cardinals. So I do think that this guy can step in and be that goal line back and provide that presence that we were really missing from this team last year, because they had all the opportunity in the world to score a ton of points. Their backs were just simply not up to the challenge in these red zone situations. And again, I mentioned not only are 56 red zone attempts vacated, but 21 of those, again, this is an actual stat, 21 of the 22 inside the 5 touches for the Cardinals at the running back position came to Kenyon Drake. Chase Edmonds had 1 all year. So this really provides a clear opportunity for Conner to thrive on an offense that will figure to be able to move the ball into scoring opportunities at a consistent rate. You guys can see that on the screen, but I highlighted it. Kenyon Drake, 21 rushing attempts inside the 5, 9 rushing touchdowns. If you're getting that type of upside from James Conner at his current ADP, as we'll get into, he's just going to smash it. I know he has the durability concerns, which I do think are baked into his ADP, but James Conner has this goal line role, in my opinion. A lot of it's vacated, 56 inside the 20, 21 inside the 5-yard line. This could really be a high touchdown score, and if I were to bet his over-under in touchdowns, I would smash the over. No hesitation, no questions asked. So talking about one to own, though, before we get into the value, I'll take Edmonds at face value by a hair. Again, he should be the main back. He should have the higher opportunity share. But the fact that they are separated right now by nearly 40 picks, it doesn't make sense to me at all, considering the projected roles. In my opinion, these 2 backs should really be going within a round of each other, similar to what we see in Tampa Bay with Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette in terms of their current ADPs. I view it being more so a timeshare rather than people want to point to Edmonds being that main back. I just simply don't see the Cardinals committing to him in that capacity. So if we're looking at it, if you're currently getting James Conner 40 picks after Chase Edmonds, and he should have the more important role in terms of goal line on this team, there's no way I'm touching Chase Edmonds if I can get James Conner. There is no way I'm touching Chase Edmonds if I can get James Conner at the end of the night. There's no way I'm touching James Conner if I can currently get there is no way I'm currently touching Chase Edmonds if I can get James Conner at the end of the 9th round in every draft, because there should absolutely not be more than a 3-round discrepancy between these two. So talking about it, James Conner, his current ADP is just ridiculously valuable. Make sure if you're doing your underdog drafts and you're going modified 0 RB, you want to get your third back by the 9th round, I think James Conner could be that perfect upside swing given his touchdown potential in this offense. So We'll quickly go over 2 honorable mentions, which I don't think are really pertinent to talk about in full depth, but ones that basically should be mentioned. Let's talk about the Eagles real quickly. This should be Miles Sanders all day and every day, in my opinion. Kenneth Gainwell could potentially mix in the third down back type of role, which we've yet to see, because he was actually a very highly graded pass blocker and has shown that when he's on the field and he's catching passes, he basically led this draft class in 2019 in terms of receptions. He has that type of capability on third down. So we could see him chip into Miles Sanders' third down output. Kerryon Johnson, I'm not worried about whatsoever. I mean, this is basically 23-year-old Todd Gurley for a reason. The Lions gave up on him. Heck, they're interested apparently in bringing on Todd Gurley. We'll get into that if that happens on the video, but going off that situation right now, the Lions should be fine with just those 2. Anyways, talking about the Eagles, Kerryon Johnson's not going to figure into this much. And finally, Atlanta Falcons. This is the Atlanta Falcons. This is a very interesting situation, in my opinion, because quite frankly, Mike Davis should be that main back if he is on the field. The problem is, if they bring in any type of competition, I could see them going to a more committee type back or more committee type system. Again, Mike Davis is a fine running back. Do not get me wrong. He performed very well in a lot of the advanced rushing metrics this past year. It's just hard for me to believe that a team's finally going to buy into him as a full main feature back, given his age, given his lack of usage in recent years prior to these 2020 campaign with the Carolina Panthers. So we'll get to see it, but if they don't bring in any competition at his current ADP going around the 4th, 5th round area, I'm fine with taking Mike Davis there, because I do think he has upsides as an RB2 if he's able to get that main workhorse back type of role for the Falcons. So anyways, if you guys made it this far in the video, comment down below murky backfields. I appreciate all of you for supporting us on the channel. Again, Danny's coming at you with the solo. Had to break down the NFC backfields to a T. Make sure you watch out for next week. I'm going to be going over these same backfields in the AFC, so stay tuned for that. Anyways, love you as always. Peace out, y'all.